This week I contemplated quite deeply on free will. It's often pointed out by science, I think, that the difference between the animal world and the human world is this ability of choice and consciousness and free will. But of course, we know and understand here that there is only one consciousness, that there is one expression of consciousness, which is apparently expressing as multiplicity and diversity with all the amazing manifestations that we experience in the world as we know it. And we are given this wonderful, miraculous body, this vehicle through which to live our lives. But the idea of free will is, I found, quite a deep contemplation. Who has free will? What is free will? I'm not pretending to have all the answers here. However, it seems that if there is to be an experience of awakened presence, aware, alive presence with infinite potential, then through the lives we live as a separate self, with a separate persona and history, there comes a point where we can choose to turn awareness back on awareness, to look more deeply at that profound question, who am I? And once we begin to feel the presence, then turning that presence of awareness back on itself seems to explode our attachment to a limited individual having a limited life. This has been the experience here. The science talks about the conscious mind, the unconscious mind, the subconscious mind. Again, these are simply words. And we talk here about the programming and the history, the story we tell about ourselves, and how that limits and puts, our lives in a box and disallows the expanded awareness to go beyond any limitations that have been created by mind, by belief, by habituation, by replaying the old stories. that we've been told and on some level at some stage have agreed to. So free will to awaken seems to come to a point where those deeper questions come to the surface, and then perhaps there's an experience of a melting of the limited, which gives a glimpse of expanded awareness of I am without the subject and object limitation. And then rather than choosing to continue on with the old stories, beliefs, habits, we inquire more deeply and seek something beyond this perception of ourselves as being limited as a separate self, which by its very experience invites in suffering. Because whenever we are alone and we are separate from, and we are limited by a set of beliefs or dogmas or a history that tells us I am this or I am that, rather than simply I am. This invites in suffering, which is so interesting because it is through suffering, through pain and through loss that sometimes is ignited that desire to go beyond, to seek union, to seek freedom from the suffering. So it seems the very outcome of being a separate, limited, identifiable mask, which invites in suffering, and then the suffering directs us very often, not always, not if that becomes our new story and we're attached to that too, but it very often invites in deeper inquiry and a seeking to go beyond suffering. And this is the crack, as Leonard Cohen said, where the light gets in. So I just open with that tonight, and that's what came through. So I look forward to hearing from you if you've got a pointing or a sharing. Was that a yes, Sebastian? So I think I've just clicked. Yeah.
I think it's a question and a comment. It's around awakening and free will. I've sort of felt for really the last 3 or 4 months, almost like marking time. And for me, I find that I only become awake, even if that's an illusion, in response to external events or external things that get me going. And so in marking time, it doesn't really feel like, sort of being awake or being more concerned with, old age and all the rest of it when you're marking time, because obviously there's, you mark in time until you're planted. But there does seem something with spring and with the sunlight today, which makes me, whether it's more awake, but again, it's something from external, which seems to be changing. And so it doesn't seem down to me whether I'm, you know, my energy level or awake. It does seem to be something that's externally catalyzed. So, which I'm sure is an illusion, because it should be from within me rather than from something external.
Interesting observation, and I think it is very, very commonly experienced that way. And probably the sunlight today, and you know, seeing the flowers, the spring flowers, and the garden coming alive, that's sparked a sense of life in you as well. However, awakeness is never reliant on the external, and that sense of aliveness that you're experiencing is a sense of awakeness. However, if it were limited to when things were fresh and new and light, then it would not be awakeness as such, because we can experience awakeness just as powerfully when things are not easy, when the body is uncomfortable and feeling old and etc. But of course, awakeness can only ever be experienced in the now moment. So we can't look back and go, oh, I was awake then, or I'll be awake in the future, because that's just mind stuff. Awakeness is only ever available to be experienced in this moment. However, I understand your reflections, and it would be interesting when you feel that experience of marking time, to when perhaps you're having that experience, to do some deep inquiry around that then. Because if being awake was only when your body felt good and things were going well, then that would be a very limited form of awakeness. I would do some deep inquiry when you're feeling like you're marking time, and also just by shining the light of awareness on that in that moment, not now, but in that moment, and bringing some aliveness into that, you may find that that in itself may just be another story. It's quite interesting when we bring the alive presence into, because that alive presence is bigger than any experience. But the old pull of the mind to label and be drawn down by pain or discomfort, or I call it blahness. You know, when you're having a blah day. If you ever have a blah day, oh yeah, how are you, blah? It's a very blah day. But even bringing awareness into that blahness brings more life into it when awareness turns back upon itself. So it'd be interesting. That's something interesting that you can experiment with, Sebastian, and see if that changes that at all. Have you tried that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be so impacted by the weather. You know, so there is a desire there, you know, not to be in that sort of state of hibernation. Yeah, it doesn't seem down to me.
No, it's definitely not down to you. you the separate, but a
Mm.
redirection of awareness upon itself is far more subtle, and I'm not sure if I'm even using the right language there, but I think you get the feel of that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and maybe you're right. I think maybe I've noticed it without actually inquiring into it. So, but yeah. Anyway, it is good that it is nice to be in a situation though with the sun shining in.
Oh, yes, absolutely. We've had a very wet season here. It's been a lot of rain, and I love rain, but the sun came out the other day, and that was the day we went to the beach, and it was my first real beach walk with putting my feet in the water, and it was lovely. Just, yeah. So yes, we get to experience all those beautiful things in this world as well.
Hi, apologies I was late too. Could we expand a little bit, please, Soraya, when at one point you were saying, and it's almost ironical, isn't it, that our habits and dogmas, beliefs, etc., are often the things that will trigger that awareness, which is an external event. And yet, at another point in time, you were stating that awakeness is never reliant on the external. And I love that notion of being aware of awareness, and I love experiencing that more and more. But is it a combination that external can play just as much a role, whereas the internal or the awareness of awareness?
Mm. Until we are steady as awareness, as awakeness, then we will be affected by external environment, by happenings. I mean, we are still having a human experience. We still have, emotions passing through that are triggered depending on the patterns and the history that's here by certain circumstances. And for some people, that may be the weather more than anything else, but also, for instance, the loss of someone you love. When you see someone suffering or in pain, there is going to be some form of response here, and that response may be deep compassion or love or sadness. All those things can pass through, and we've talked a lot here about being open for all that to pass through as well, because that's a sense of aliveness in itself, that there is a sense of freedom here for, everything to be accepted and allowed to pass through, but not to hold on to that or to identify with those emotions. When some of those emotions pass through, if there's still old patterns there, then they may trigger reactivity. But that is not awakeness. That is when we then become triggered. And what becomes triggered? Awakeness is never triggered. Awakeness is vast, infinite possibility for everything, and is everything, and is in everything, and flows through everything. It is the one thing. But then we experience that in this in this amazing kaleidoscope of experience that we're having as all possibilities and all things are possible. However, when we are awake, we can still feel everything passing through, but it doesn't trigger reactivity as such. We may still feel sadness passing through, we may still feel compassion, and that, you know, we may be touched, gratitude wells up. You know, there's even a possibility that, you know, some anger might pass through, but it will pass through. And the triggers there will not be acted upon, because there is awakeness there to see that that is simply something passing through. But yes, until we are, you know, until we have the Buddha mind, or the unconditioned mind, you know, and all of us here are still working with some conditioning. I think we'd all agree with that. Until we have that completely free, unconditioned mind, then there will be some ripples in the pond. Yeah. Until there is pure, clear, awake light, awareness, consciousness. And then, you know, as we've talked about, you know, the mirror is clear and it simply reflects what is. But even then, we are given a human body. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be pain passing through. I've had lots of pain passing through in the last, you know, number of months with the leg, and I know that, you know, people on this, all of you guys have too, have had your own individual challenges in the lives that we're being asked to live. That doesn't mean, though, that we move into a state of reactivity, believing that we are a separate self, having a separate experience, and that it's all about the separate me. There's a very different awareness when we understand who we truly are, that we are not limited to this body, that we are unborn and undying. That presence is always here, but only ever here now. That time is, you know, a created agreement in humanity to make sense of this awesome experience of life itself. So yes, there will be influences by outside, you know, circumstance, etc., until there isn't. As we say, don't we, Ish? We'll slip in the doo-doo until we don't slip in the doo-doo. We can swim in the doo-doo sometimes. There's plenty of doo-doo around.
It's actually wonderfully liberating to be aware of awakeness. And at the same time, I feel compassion for those that don't seem to be aware of it, but I'm learning to accept what is and just spread the love, spread, whether it be through meditation or just heart or and mine is not to question why I've been blessed, but I have, and yay.
Well, as Jesus said, they know not what they do, and you know, we can never ever criticize another for not, and I know that you didn't mean criticism with that. Or, you know, we have to understand that, you know, the universe is unfolding exactly as it should, and that there's nothing wrong with anything. It's all okay.
And sometimes you just get a little bit frustrated or sad, and you want to sort of, I know it won't work, but you want to sometimes get them, especially when they're your close friends, and say, you don't have to worry about it. You don't stress. Yeah.
Yeah, and especially, of course, Kathy, in this current climate at the moment, with everything that's going on, and the illusion that's being woven and twisted, and the media, and the fear that is seemingly being projected. And with awakeness, of course, we understand that fear is fear, and it is an illusion, and there is no need for fear.
Yet it's also all perfect.
Yep. Yeah, if you look back, even if we use that man-made and created lineage of history, you look back through history, and civilizations have risen and fallen, and beliefs have risen and fallen. I mean, we used to believe that the world was flat, and that anyone of coloured race wasn't human. I mean, there has been so many false concepts, and of course we can think they're ridiculous now, but how limited is the mind of man, that it's not open to the infinite potential of all as one. That's so liberating, that there is no separation here. But yet we're given this incredible life to live. And if we understand that we are all one, then love becomes the greatest power, and yeah, it just makes life very beautiful. Thanks, Kathy. Anyone else want to share?
I just think, to follow along what you're saying, I think free will gives us the choice. We can constantly choose between love and fear in all our actions and all that we do. I think that's the greatest use of free will we have.
Absolutely. Do we choose love, or do we choose fear? And we talk about exactly that a lot on this platform. Yeah, so it's just perfect that you've said that.
I love the acronym for fear, which is false evidence appearing real.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sums it up quite nicely.
Beautiful. Really lovely to have you guys with us.
Oh, I enjoy everyone's company. It's good to have this sort of conversation to tune into every Sunday night.
And we've often said that here in this saying that, this is a global platform, and this invitation goes out to several thousand people. And here we are, just a few of us who actually turn up. And most of the people you see here tonight turn up every week. And so it does take commitment. We can't think, oh yeah, that awakeness, yeah, I'll try that sometime, or I'll have a bit of that today. We'll have a look at that today. It's a lifetime. It's a life choice. Once I think something is woken up inside, there is no turning back, because the path behind looks too dark.
When you're seeking, as a seeker, you straight away separate yourself from what you're seeking. And I thought, wow, what a statement. This is, it's when you start, what are we seeking for? The more we go to seek and search out, the less we are what we are seeking, I guess, And he said it's about being. If you stop being and stop seeking, then we get closer to, I suppose, experiencing what we're trying to experience, in a sense. So, yeah, I was triggered by Sebastian's comment about seasons, etc. So, thank you, Sebastian, for that. Good reminder for me.
And that's why we call this the direct path. Not just we, but those who see this, you know, when awareness begins to turn back on itself, and we understand that awakeness can only happen now, right now, which means that's an end to seeking, because seeking is always heading in a direction, heading towards something, seeking something out. So this direct path of turning awareness back on itself right now, so that there is awakeness here. There's no room for seeking, because seeking is always taking us away from presence. And, you know, many of us here were seekers for years until we realized that it's right here, right now, ever available. And there's nowhere to go to get it. But it's still so valuable to have a sangha, which is what we have here. A sangha is a community of supportive beings that are all committed to living awake, and, you know, supporting each other as we do here. That is valuable, because sometimes it can feel very lonely if you have this understanding and you don't see that agreement anywhere else. It takes strength to stand up and live in truth. Thank you, Ish. Beautiful reminder. Perfect. Perfect. So I'm going to turn over to Terry now. You there, Terry?
I remember very clearly when I felt the falling away of doing practices like meditation and anything that was trying to achieve some sort of state of peace, or to get away from confusion and stress. I mean, I still do yoga because it's like a sort of physical fitness thing, you know. You've got to look after the vehicle, so to speak. But and before I came to that point, I had been experiencing a kind of seesaw of busyness and lack of activity, I suppose you could call it. And in between that seesaw, when there was a kind of balance, there was a sense of peace there, which was no longer attached to having done something to achieve it, or something happening that caused it. And so just as the seesaw reached that point of balance, there was this experience. It's not really an experience, but the sense of something being there that was without causation. And then, of course, it would swing. and a kind of balancing of energies that was naturally occurring without doing something to make it happen. And of course, emotions are involved in that too, because there's a constant movement of judgment, which is happening beneath the surface, which creates the good, this is good, this is bad, this is to be gained, this is to be avoided, constantly going on underneath as a background. And that is translated into feelings in the body. So it's not really a decision-making process in the sense of I am choosing this or I am not choosing that. It's a sense of something here responding to what's happening around without recognizing a particular cause. I remember reading The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and he talks about the pain body, which is residual, incomplete feelings that are stored and experienced. Incomplete experience, basically, stored up in the body, which awakens occasionally, wanting to be heard and felt. And this can be also experienced as a kind of seesaw. It was a great relief when I finally realized that I didn't have to do anything in order to be happy. You know, I had my traveling, all those things that I had lined up in the future or things that I needed today. And it's a never-ending surprise that I'm actually happy. How could I be happy? I am happy. I'm not. It's almost an unwavering happiness, I would say. Even with a headache, I'm what you might call happy. Doesn't make sense, because, and it's not like I'm saying, I know that this will pass, therefore I'm happy. I'm not explaining it. It's just that there's an absolute sense of being okay with whatever happens. And that is including everything, including the big C, cancer or COVID or whatever. There's lots of big C's actually. But I mean, I don't recognize myself if I relate to the past, because I haven't been happy in the past. I'm just happy. I can't explain it. So that must be who I am, what I am. So I put it into the music, I put it into songs. I talk with Soraya, we go walking in the forest. It's just a simple thing of not needing to do anything much. It's beyond description, really. I can't help it. I'm just happy, all right?
Thanks, Terry. That's brilliant.
Sorry, yeah. Well, what more can I say? Yeah, there's no comparison with who I was, because I am this unrecognizable person to me. I mean, I may be shot down in flames tomorrow, I don't know, but I'm just saying that I'm happy now. Yeah.
I think the keys there that Terry shared were, and the noticeable things that have occurred here and I see in others as well, is no longer needing to find a reason why one is feeling how one is feeling. Just to allow the experience of whatever to pass through cleanly, freshly. Okay, this is going, a headache's going through. Okay. A bit of sadness is going through. Fine. This is going through, that's going through, but no longer needing to find, oh, this is happening because you did that, or you did that, or she said that, or, you know, and then the whole mind kicks in and it creates another story, which is going to be incomplete experience. Actually, I had just got this lovely saying by Ramana, actually, which I don't know where it is at the moment, but it's just from one of the ancient Upanishads, but it's just so true. Every time we go into thinking, going into causation, which could be blame, name, fame, or whatever, we're creating new karma. We're creating more incomplete experience. So we're tying ourselves. We're creating a denser, separate web around ourselves. What we need to do, or what occurs naturally when we turn awareness back on itself, to become aware of the awareness that is here, that the veil gets thinner and thinner and thinner till all that need to name and blame and point the finger towards why we're experiencing what we're experiencing. As all that need falls away, the veil gets thinner and thinner, and the stories become less and less relevant to the now. And as those stories that we've told ourselves, maybe, you know, from childhood, fall away, there's a sense of greater freedom. And it's that freedom from that thick veil that disables us from turning awareness back onto pure awareness. That thick veil prevents us from doing that, and the thinner that gets, the more clarity is here, and the less identification with as a separate persona who has had this, that, and the other history. All that history falls away until here we are, naked, open awareness, open to the infinite potential unfolding in each moment. And that is full of aliveness. Even if there's some pain passing through here, even if there's a few tears that go through here, some sadness, some playfulness, some laughter, whatever. And in that, which is what Terry was expressing, happiness or contentment or just okayness becomes, everything's okay. And in that okayness, there's no resistance to anything. And resistance, whenever we resist something, we create friction. And friction creates irritation. And that irritation brings us back into our persona again, into our separate self again. So without that resistance, without that friction, without that tug of war, then infinite potential and open awareness and freedom is here, and that's experienced quite easily and naturally. It just simply is. So I call it isness. So isness becomes the business. Then thank you everyone for showing up. So much love and freedom for all of us. Namaste.